Hey, how's it going guys? This is Nigel here and welcome back to Science Explained. Today we are again looking at rockets, this time more in depth into specific rockets. So without further ado, let's dive into the topic then. So, last time we talked about the more technical parts of rockets and a brief history of them. Yet more specific names of rockets, except the R7N1 Saturn V and V2, are not mentioned. And in this video I think it would be good to mention a few more rockets that are worth time to talk about. So here we go. Let's first start off with the Atlas series rocket. First designed to be an ICBM, like most rockets in the 50s and 60s, Atlas rockets are very ugly in my opinion. But I mean, being a weapon of destruction does not really need to look good, does it? But soon later, when the United States got interested with space travel, they refurbished and modified the ICBM into an orbital rocket. It was planned to rival Wernher von Braun's Space Explorer rocket, but since 3 out of 3 test launches had failed, they still went for von Braun's rocket design. But despite the bad head start, the Atlas rocket soon developed very confusing variations: Atlas LV-3A, LV-3B, SLV-3, SLV-3A, SLV-3B, LV-3C, SLV-3C, and LV-3D. These rockets are extremely similar to each other, but the LV-3A had the most launches, so very awesome. Then they started making more good-looking rockets better optimized for space travel. Atlas G, Atlas 1, Atlas 2, Atlas 2A, 2AS, Atlas E, F and H are those examples. Then, out of nowhere, the Americans got their hands on some Soviet rocket engines, and they were sort of like, OMG, this engine is actually good, unlike our expectations from Soviet products, and made an agreement between the American government and the Russian government to buy some of their fancy engines. This particular engine in question is the RD-180, basically an RD-170 cut in half. If you don't know what is an RD-170, it is the biggest and the most powerful engine in the world. By the look of it, you might question, isn't it 4 engines? Well, it depends on how you define a single engine. RD-170 is an engine with 4 combustion chambers and 4 nozzles, but driven with 1 single turbopump, so it is still considered to be 1 single engine. So when your science teacher or your friends say that the Rocketdyne F1 engine is the biggest and the most powerful engine in the world, go and correct them and say RD-170 is the biggest and the most powerful engine in the world. If you're still confused, don't worry. I'll make one video dedicated to Soviet rocket engines soon, so make sure you're subscribed so you won't miss it. Anyway, back to the topic. RD-180 is a very good engine indeed, so they utilised this engine on the Atlas 3 and 5 rockets and gained some success. Especially the Atlas 5 rocket has been launched 83 times, delivering payloads such as the New Horizons spacecraft, the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter, and the Boeing Starliner crew vehicle was launched just a few months ago. Now, on to the Delta rockets. I dare say they are as confusing as Intel's 10th gen Ice Lake CPUs. You see, at the early stages they used letters. Although the rockets themselves are not as exciting as the name sounded, we still read them out loud. Delta A, B, C, D, E, F, G, J, K, L, M, and N. Absolutely fascinating. When they thought that using letters are confusing, then they made 4-digit codes for the later rocket and their variations, and to be honest, they're so boring that I'll just skip them and jump straight to Delta 2. Delta 2 is still considered to be in the 4-digit code family. It consists of the 6000 series and 7000 series Delta rockets, and are classified as Delta 2 for absolutely no reason whatsoever. The Delta Series 2 rockets can almost always be seen with 9 solid rocket boosters, which is strange considering normal rockets typically has 0 to 4 SRBs. Nevertheless, Delta 2 is a very reliable rocket, have launched some very notable payloads such as Kepler Space Telescope, Mars Exploration Rover and Spitzer Space Telescope. And then, the powerful, enhanced, yet unremarkable Delta III rocket rode across our screen. It only had 3 launches, and all of them have failed. Now, onto the Delta IV rocket. Almost twice the height of the Delta II and III, it got rid of the SRBs while remaining as powerful and can launch 8 tons into low Earth orbit. Then, they strapped 2 SRBs on there to improve the launch capacity, which is quite a good thing because it can now launch 10 tons into low Earth orbit. And then, it seems like 2 SRBs is not good enough, they added 2 more SRBs, boosting the launch capacity to 11.5 tons into the low Earth orbit. It seems like they finally grew tired of constantly strapping SRBs on the core stages because it's not cool enough. Meet the Delta IV Heavy, a beast of a rocket and is able to deliver up to 23 tons into the low Earth orbit. Well, as you see, the secret to the success is just to copy the core stage and put it on each side of the rocket. And I mean, it is pretty effective. And as a bonus, the exhaust flames are just excellent to watch, since the use of liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen made the flames very clear instead of the dirty yellow colour of the kerosene. The Delta IV series rocket used the Rocketdyne RS-68 as their main engine. It is an absolutely beautiful engine, and well, this image has been used numerous times in textbooks, videos and other books as well. It has the max thrust of 2,950 kilonewtons and a thrust-to-weight ratio of 45.3 to 1. Impressive. I've almost forgotten about the Titan rocket. Also started as an ICBM, was then modified into Titan 2, 3 and 4. And the difference between Titan family and other US rockets is that you can see the US Air Force logo on it, which means it's driven directly by the American government. Okay, done with these very capitalist looking rockets, it is time to step into the communist Soviet territory of absolutely awesome rockets. Unlike the capitalist United States, the Soviet Union went for a different approach towards making rockets. Since there are no commercial use for the rocket, the government developed their own rockets for their own use, at least before 1991. Meet this Proton rocket, the most successful heavy boosters in the world. It was first launched in 1965, just 6 years after the legendary R7, and its last launch was in 2019. Its chief designer, Valentin Glushko, was Sergei Korolyov's main rival and is found guilty of denouncing him and putting him in the Gulag. Still, personal things aside, the Proton rockets are great rockets. Some of the payload launched are the Mir, the Salute program, which is not the Salute, and the first piece of the ISS. It started life as, not surprisingly, a super heavy ICBM, and then was modified to make an orbital rocket. The difference is that most ICBM modified rockets are not big, but the Proton rocket is just huge. Able to deliver 23 tons into the low Earth orbit, it is a very powerful rocket, considering its age. Thanks to the 6 solid rocket boost. Wait a minute, that's not 6 solid rocket boosters. These are attached to the main core as extra fuel tank and holds the engine as well. Curious.
Curious. Very curious.
But still, the Proton rocket is very reliable with only a few failures. The Proton rocket had 2 variants, the Proton K and the Proton M. Both burn the highly toxic hypergolic dinitrogen tetroxide and unsymmetrical dinitral hydrazine. The difference is that the Proton M has a 4th stage which boosted its launch capacity greatly. It is a very beautiful rocket. Every time I see a Proton rocket launch, I want to see it again. The brilliant translucent flames and the shock diamonds, they're just fabulous to watch. Okay, Now, let's go to China and see the Chinese space program. The main series of rocket is called the Long March, which is a historical event in the modern Chinese history. But this is not a history class, so we will not go too deep here. The Long March rocket is named a lot simpler compared to the American rockets. The Long March 1 is a short-lived rocket, only launched twice, although both were successes. Then the Long March 2A launched 4 times and 3 successes. Long March 2C launched 52 times with only 1 failure. And one note here, at this stage China actually started launching the American Iridium satellites, 12 of them to be precise. Yes, you have heard me correct, China has helped the American government to launch satellites, although it's for the world's good. And they also started to accept foreign orders from 1992, launching a Swedish Frigor satellite into orbit. Long March 2D launched 46 times with no failures. Long March 2E, the first Chinese heavy launch vehicle, able to lift 9 tons into low Earth orbit, is used for launching foreign satellites. Then the Long March F, the first and only Chinese rocket rated for manned space travel, launched 13 times with no failure, or it would be catastrophic. The Long March 3 series are very similar to Long March 2, so I'll just skip through it without mentioning a few interesting facts. The first launch of Long March 3B is a failure, killing 2 and injuring 57. This is the single biggest failure in the Chinese rocket history. But despite the failure, it launched the first Chinese moon lander, the Chang'e 3, and the first moon lander to land on the other side of the moon, the Chang'e 4. Then the Long March 4 series, they are small and cost-efficient rockets, launching small payloads into orbit. Then the big boy, Long March 5, the heaviest Chinese rocket and has a similar launch capability to a Delta Heavy. And unlike the majority of other Chinese rockets, the Long March 5 uses liquid hydrogen as a propellant, which is a good thing since hypergolic fuels are really toxic. Then, 2 more modern rockets, the RP-1 fueled Long March 7 and the tiny, easy-to-launch, solid rocket Long March 11 made a conclusion of the Chinese rocket industry. Okay, now onto the European rockets. The Ariane series rocket designed by European Space Agency or ESA are very successful, especially the Ariane 5, having launched more than 100 times and launching numerous satellites into orbit. And it was planned to launch the James Webb Space Telescope, the biggest and the most advanced space telescope in the world, using the Ariane 5 in the future. The Ariane 5 is a heavy lift vehicle, able to deliver 20 tons into low Earth orbit. It uses liquid hydrogen as the core stage and has 2 massive SRBs to provide additional thrust. Just a few years ago, the ESA developed a new type of small light rocket called Vega, not to be confused with AMD Vega. It's a rocket using solid propellant and can lift 1.5 ton into a polar orbit. The Japanese were always very good in super fancy technology and engineering, and they were not bad at making rockets either. They started off with a ridiculous looking H1, but then the H2, H2A and H2B were quite well known and was able to put as much as 16 tons into the low Earth orbit. Another interesting rocket made by the Japanese is the SS-525, the smallest orbital rocket in the world, measuring only 9 meters tall and 0.5 meters in diameter. It is absolutely tiny, and it carried an even more tiny 3-kilogram satellite into orbit on 3rd February 2018. The India Space Program, formerly known as Indian Space Research Organisation, have also designed some interesting rockets. The first rocket is called SLV and is tiny, of course not as small as the SS-525, but still very small. Able to deliver 40 kilograms into orbit, this is India's first rocket. Then they improved their tiny rocket and made the ASLV, almost quadrupling the launch capacity to 150 kilograms, although with only 1 success out of 4 launches. Then suddenly, they decided to make big things. The PSLV, or Polar Satellite Launch Vehicle, is 44 meters tall and can launch 3.8 tons into the low Earth orbit. The GSLV or Geosynchronous Satellite Launcher is slightly bigger and can launch 5 tons into low Earth orbit. The GSLV Mark III, which looks extremely like a knockoff Ariane 5, is bigger and can launch 10 tons into low Earth orbit. Done with all of these normal rockets, there's some other rockets that I would like to talk about. The Space Shuttle, arguably the most famous rocket in the world, but its specifications are very unremarkable. I think the more impressive rocket should be the Energia, a Russian launcher, primarily used to launch the Buran, which is the Soviet counterpart of the Space Shuttle. It's more flexible and a lot more powerful as well. Unlike the Space Shuttle, the core stage of the Energia has its own engine, and it has 4 massive liquid boosters using the RD-170 engine we talked about earlier. It had 2 launches, and while both were successful, for some reason the Soviet Union still cancelled this program. Another rocket worth spending time to talk about is the SpaceX Falcon 9 and Falcon Heavy. They are truly spectacular rockets. They're powerful, they're cheap, and they're pretty darn reusable as well. I dare say that they are the best rocket that North States funded and owns in the world. And it only costs $50 million per launch. That's 15 tons into orbit. It can send you home to space if you want to. And with my brilliant maths calculation, that equals to $3,205 per kilogram into low Earth orbit and $6,024 per kilogram into geotransfer orbit. Using the Falcon Heavy, it is only $1,410 per kilogram into orbit. I mean, I can use my savings to send my pen into orbit using this thing. If your pen weighs 50 grams, which is pretty heavy for a pen, it costs $70.5 to send into space. That is incredible. How time flies. We're now near the end of our video. Hope you have enjoyed this video and make sure to like and subscribe. And don't forget to turn on notification bell so you won't miss any more awesome videos of mine. Thanks for watching and see ya.